Hey, everybody. This is GB 2.0. Welcome, and this is episode 4 of season 4. It is May 5th, 2018. I am your host, Clare Wuellner, and joining me today is Jen Peeples. Tracie Harris is, I think, stuck in traffic or some such, and so she'll be joining us shortly. And we have a super special guest today, whom I will introduce in a moment. But first, I want to tell you that GB 2.0 is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization dedicated to the separation of government and religion and the promotion of positive atheist culture. I am not one to overshare, but I want to let everybody know that about 3 weeks ago, a horse dumped me on my head, and I suffered a pretty serious concussion. I am still technically on cognitive rest, but I have tried to store up all of my rest so that I can be as together as possible for the show. And I will probably get very tired, and if I say something wacky, you'll know why. And Jen has promised to rescue me if I get into too much trouble.
I will rescue you.
Thank you. And so our super special guest is Mandisa Latifa Thomas. I had the pleasure of working with her on the board of Foundation Beyond Belief. She is the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers. She recently won the Unitarian Universalist Humanist Association 2018 Person of the Year Award. And the other thing that's important that I am very excited to hear about is her recent career shift. I'll let her tell you about that. So here is Mandisa. Hello, Mandisa. Can you hear us?
Yes. Hello, Claire. Hello, Jen.
Hey.
It's been such a long time.
It's been too long.
Since the last time we have seen each other.
Right
and
on.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
I really do appreciate it.
We're really excited to have you.
We're snazzed.
I'm glad. I know we see each other online a lot, but this is the first time I've heard your voices in so long.
Right.
So I'm really, really happy to be here.
Right.
Yeah, we got to do something about that.
Right. It's just wrong.
Yeah.
You need to get here. Come to Austin. It's awesome. So would you like to tell us about your recent career shift and all that means?
Actually, yes. For those of you who aren't aware, and thank you very much for the introduction.
Sure.
I am the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers Incorporated, which is based in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Atlanta area. And for the past 7 years now, we started in 2011. We've gone from a local organization to national, where we now have 11 chapters across the United States. We just established one in the Cincinnati, Ohio area. So we've been working diligently to increase the visibility and support, particularly for Black atheists and atheists who are Blacks who are doubting religion within the Black community.
Right.
And we've been that official organization that has been reaching out and working to actually connect folks, not just within the Black community, but also within the secular community. And for the past 7 years, I have been doing all of this while working a full-time job, as well as being a full-time mother, as well as being a full-time wife.
Right on.
To a husband who has sickle cell anemia.
Oh, my. Yeah.
And so, when we talk about, and I'm so sorry to hear about your condition right now, Claire. I really hope that improves very soon, because people don't understand life happens to us.
Yeah, right.
And I've been doing all of this while working full-time. And so I was 3 years into my job when we started Black Nonbelievers. And because it was, and it still is, a volunteer organization, I was able to work, within my days off and within my work hours and outside of my work hours to conduct being business and do the things that we were able to do for it. But this year, over time, the demands and the requests within the community have increased, which I'm very, very happy about and I'm very proud of. And the upcoming award, the award for Person of the Year is upcoming. That will take the ceremony and will take place in June in Kansas City. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Right on.
There became a need this year for me to quit my job and put it aside so that I can go to being an activist full time. Black nonbelievers and the movement does need my presence more. It needs my work more.
Yeah.
It is where I have determined that my time would be best suited and actually working within this community on issues pertaining to people of color, pertaining to women, pertaining to the LGBT community that we still need to work on. That there's a tide that is changing, and it just became that time for me to hang up the full-time job in order to be able to do this more often or to do it fully.
Right on.
And,
so how are you supporting yourself on that? I mean,
I've created a Patreon account.
Cool.
Similar to, I know Matt Dillahunty, Seth Andrews, and, there are others that have Patreon subscriptions where there's content created that people can subscribe to monthly. And I have done the same thing. One thing about me is that I'm very unorthodox. I'm a very unorthodox individual, always have been. For those who aren't familiar with my background, I was pretty much raised secular. Mm-hmm. So there is an experience and a perspective that I have growing up secular, as a Black woman within the Black community that I know can be very beneficial within the atheist community, because there's a lot of things that are missed. And I think being able to, I like the description of the podcast where you say you're providing positive atheism, mm-hmm. because we definitely, and that's something that at Black Nonbelievers we do as well, mm-hmm. because once people have reevaluated their relationship or their religious perspective, then what happens from there? How do people move forward from there? And that's what we encourage. That community building, those connections, people being able to do more openly as atheists, and as well as normalizing and destigmatizing atheism, particularly amongst the communities that need them.
Well, and
so I provide. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your thoughts.
Oh no, I was saying that I'm working on I'll be doing some like live streaming on Patreon where people can ask me questions directly. I'll be speaking on certain subjects that are near and dear to me, as well as providing some good and unfiltered advice on how to better improve on community building. Because there's a lot of there's a lot of good talk about how to do it, but people aren't necessarily doing it.
Right.
And so I think I know that I've built up enough of a rapport and done enough work in this community, as well as being able to do it, from what my previous job was. I was an event services manager at the CDC, and that detailed a lot of execution, a lot of hands-on work. So I have that ground-up experience and expertise, and it has shown in the growth of Black nonbelievers. I think it has shown with building my own profile in the movement, which wasn't intentional on building my profile. It really was to create this organization and to expand it for others that needed it.
Right.
So I think that I have enough credibility in this movement to show that, there is something that is of value that I know that I can provide. And certainly the support, I can't do this without the support of the people who have expressed that they've appreciated and needed it.
Yeah, I was just going to.
So this is what I'm hoping to be able to do, especially in the near future.
Yeah, we have your Patreon information up on the screen here. So anybody that goes to the YouTube channel and sees this on YouTube will see your Patreon credentials up there. And I just wanted to comment on the whole community building aspect of it. And by the way, Tracie just arrived, so she's plugging in here. Hey. But all three of us have been.
Hey, Mandisa.
All three of us have been involved in that whole, community building and running, a local community. And we understand it's a non-trivial amount of work. It takes real commitment to do that. And I think it's just amazing you've been able to not only do that locally, but also kind of expand this out to other places and identify the people that could help you grow this movement. Because I think it's, the community aspect of religion is something that we can easily replicate within our own communities. But again, it takes a lot of work and commitment to do that. So,
I know, Mandisa, that you're asked this often, and this dovetails with what Jen is talking about, the community and so forth. But I think the answer to this question bears repeating is, why Black non-believers? What does being Black have to do with the importance of a certain type of community?
Absolutely. And by the way, Bree says hello to everyone.
Oh,
Those
hey.
of you who aren't familiar with Bree.
Yeah.
Hey, Bree.
Is one of our board members, and
Right.
she's one of our board members for Black non-believers, and she's also over our Detroit affiliate.
Right on.
So that is a very good question that we do get asked very often. The most recent Pew Research numbers show that 87% of Blacks in the United States are still very religious. Now, while the number of non-religious are growing within the United States, that is still a very staggering number within the Black community. And there are a number of reasons for that. A number of them are historical. It goes back to the slavery within the United States, of course, which some did not have a choice of.
Oh, my God.
I'm not even going to go there. But,
Don't even.
I just had to kind of put that in there.
Oh, my God. That's
But there's a lot that has to do with tradition and the culture and the climate of the Black community, with the church being so involved with that doctrine of suffering and waiting for an afterlife, and being forced with this religion, being forced on slaves in this country. And once slavery ended, with the church being so prevalent and institution and crucial and critical to Black life, whether it was establishing historically Black colleges and universities, providing community support, as well as a sense of aspiration, and leadership, and a sense of prominence within the community. The church has played such a huge part in the Black community that it is very, very difficult to disassociate from the identity. So that therefore, although there were a lot of religious people that were involved within the civil rights movement per se, let's for example, the perception is that the Black church was so instrumental to the struggles in our community that it was God that brought us through everything. So you have this very, very emotional dynamic and this cultural dynamic within the Black community that makes it almost impossible to disassociate from many Black folks. So when you're rejecting God, it's like you're rejecting your community, you're rejecting your race, you're rejecting your culture.
Right.
And there's a lot that goes along with that, considering the climate of tensions that still take place within the United States.
Right.
And
so this is something I've heard over and
Uh-huh.
over again from so many Black atheists who've said that, it's not only all of the baggage that, say, a white atheist would have breaking away from their family's religious traditions. You have all that stuff, plus all the cultural stuff on top of that.
Yep,
And
that is correct.
and there is this, if you say the word atheist and ask someone what comes to mind, it's invariably a middle-aged white guy. And so there's this image of what an atheist is, and I think that for particularly young Black people struggling with questions of religion and everything, it's easy to say, well, that's not me. And it's
right. And this is a problem too, because we also inform and educate on the history of humanism, free thought, and atheism within the Black community, which the overall secular community is lacking.
Right.
But we haven't, the one thing we haven't done is try to rely on the overall community to make that a priority, even though it should. I remind folks that the Foundation for Black History Month was started by a freethinker, Dr. Carter G. Woodson.
Yeah.
That historically there have always been atheists in our community. The history of the Black community isn't always just about struggle. It's about perseverance.
Right.
People who have been able to overcome, the struggles, not just the struggles, trials and tribulations. And there are many historically Black atheists, humanists, and freethinkers that have contributed, but unfortunately, their legacy is obscured by religious folks and the church. Yeah. And this is something that we have to do to reshape, to redefine the narrative and to redefine the legacy of our communities, because it doesn't just belong to old white men. Atheism does. There have been atheists in our community, and there are more coming. But they need to know that there's always been that representation and that there's actually more to come, that's what we're building and developing.
Right. And
so it's been... Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is so important, because I sometimes hear mostly white people asking, why aren't there more Black atheists? And alternatively, when they see a group like Black non-believers, well, why you got to have
your own group?
Your own group,
Right.
Aren't you just being divisive? And it's like, well, the overall atheist community as a whole has, at best, been indifferent to the concerns and needs of Black atheists, and at worst has been dismissive and sometimes openly hostile to people who are not white, not cisgendered, not heterosexual. So, there is a need.
100%.
There is a need to carve out a place. And that's how I see it, is you're carving a space for yourself in a movement that is, at best, sometimes indifferent to what you need.
Absolutely it is. And we many of us have experienced this firsthand. Very much so. People will wonder, well, why are our groups basically so white? Well, what can we do? And then when we tell folks what they can do, it falls on deaf ears.
Right.
So it's like, well, you don't really want to do anything different.
Yeah.
You may be saying that you do. And then when we see, and I'm a type of person, I'm the individual that, look, I'm not just going to wait for something to come to me. I need to make it happen.
Right.
And I do tend to get restless, and I am a person of action, that if there is a step that I can take, then I'll do it. Mm-hmm. And yes, there is still a need for us to assert that identity within both communities, because for one, yes, there has been that indifference and that, and then also there's this push for any person of color. Like whenever we do speak, it's like, well, have you heard of Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris? There's always this need to back that up by a white atheist, and it's like, wow, way to miss the point.
Right?
Way to miss the point on that.
Yeah. And, that reminds me of an email that we got shortly after we announced the Godless Bitches reboot. A guy emailed us to say, hey, since you've got this, women-only atheist feminist podcast that you're rebooting, you should have, a male-only podcast. You could call it...
nonprofits?
Yeah. You could call it, I think he said heathen bastards or something like that. And I was sitting there looking at that thinking, yeah, that's what we're missing in the community is
male voices.
Male voices.
Yeah.
More white guys, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
More white guys.
I think the thing, too, though, is that there's not like a ban on males on this show.
Right.
Right? It just happens that it's three women. It's funny because we do get the occasional letter regarding nonprofits or regarding the Atheist Experience saying, why aren't there more women voices, or why don't you invite? And I've even seen nonprofits get attacked, right? Like, why don't you have women on there? Like, what is it? And it's like, well, they have invited women on,
right.
and I've filled in, and I actually remember years ago them asking women specifically in ACA. There was a few people that got approached, and it was just like, would you be interested in doing this regularly?
Right.
So it's not that they're closed
to a female voice on nonprofits. It's just it happens to be guys. And so when you have the three women, people are like, well, why is it just why is it just women? And it reminds me of that Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote where they asked her how many women should be on the Supreme Court. And she said all of them. And I remember people were freaking out about that comment. And it's like you realize that until 1930, it was all men. Like every court makeup was all men, and yet that was acceptable. But when somebody suggests, what if it was all women? Suddenly that's horrific. Yeah, you're excluding men, and it's like why was it okay to exclude women all the way up to 1930? Yeah,
it shows you how far we need to go.
Well, I think that there's this thing. It's like you're saying. There's different perspectives and different demographics to a different degree are considered quote like the norm, and so you have this sort of normal that people don't question. So when it's all men, people don't tend to notice. Because, well, it's men. Men are normal, right? And if you're not men, then we notice it, And like I say, it's not 100%, but it's frequent. I did a post recently, just the other day, about somebody had posted on demographics in the U.S. There was this thing going around. I'm not even going to get into it. It was about cultural appropriation, and I wasn't as attached to the original post. But one of the things that caught my eye were some of the comments that people were making. And I was like, wow, these comments are really abysmal, right? And they were doing this thing where it's just like, well, then what about American culture? Like what? And the quote, the quote, right, thank you. The quote American culture that they were listing was like Happy Days. Yeah. Right? And I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm like third generation Italian American. And I didn't grow up with hot dogs and baseball. I grew up with cannolis and lasagna, and and that was an American cultural experience. That's why they call it Italian American.
Yes. Yeah. I'm gonna chime in here for a moment because it's amazing what people will perceive as American culture and think that we all, are, that we all agree. When the incident with in Charlottesville, where the where those white guys where they had the protest or the rally, where they were basically today's modern day Klan,
right?
And people were so surprised, like, oh my gosh, how could this happen in this day and age? How could this happen in this country? Clear. And if you're a person of color, we're like, well, it never went away.
Yeah,
like this is the America we know.
Right.
This is the America that we grew up with. This is the America that our ancestors grew up with. It wasn't a happy days for many of my ancestors.
Well, and I got to tell you, as a white woman growing up in the South, people will assume that you share a particular viewpoint on that, and they will share things with you that are frightening. That
sure,
I've often been astonished by how readily people will reveal their. I think the polite term we use these days is alt-right, but it's really, racist.
They're
racist. They're white nationalists. They're Klan. Some of them are neo-Nazis, and it's all about these. Other people over there are responsible for everything that's wrong with their life. And
the epitome of that is there's a supposed to be funny video going around about how friendly people from the South are. And I'll tell you what, they're friendly if you're white, look Christian at least, don't dress inappropriately in their view, definitely cis, definitely hetero. And it's just... it's just not true. I have been outside of their parameters, and the friendly stops.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Absolutely.
So it shows a huge white privilege window right there.
Yes.
White, cis, het, Christian window there.
Yep.
Kind of dovetailing on that, Mandisa, I have another question for you. In our world, being a black woman has its challenges, and being an atheist woman has its challenges, and being a black atheist has its challenges, and then there's being a black atheist woman. what do you want those of us who are not in that narrow but powerful demographic to know? How can we do better?
I don't, I want people to know that, I know for me in particular, and I can speak for quite a few other Black atheists, is that we're not looking for pity.
No, God, no. Right.
Support is always great. We didn't do this because we were looking for acceptance. We did it. I know we did it because it needed to be done. It was necessary.
Right.
And fear doesn't run my life. It never has. I've always been an outspoken individual, and many of us possess the same qualities and same drive and desire as many of our white counterparts. The church and state separation is very, very important to me. Reproductive rights, LGBT rights, human rights, all of those things are very, very important. But I think, though, that it is crucial now more than ever that people are doing some introspection and self-reflection on how they are communicating and how they may be turning people away based on their lack of consideration in regards to people, because you can't build community without people. Mm-hmm. And granted, there's all different types of people in this community.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Some who we want to engage with and some who we can't. And that's okay. I just want, I need for more people to understand that that there are more voices out here. There are more people out here than they think. One of the accomplishments, I won't even say goals now because it has been an accomplishment. One of the things that Black Nonbelievers has done has amplified and increased those voices. There is now there are now Black atheist authors that you can reference, that we can point you to, speakers and activists that have come through our organization, and they're coming up and they're making their way because they've connected sufficiently with us and have found their voice and have found their sense of activism. So we're not looking for pity. The one thing, we don't need saviors.
No, right.
And we shouldn't be looking for saviors. We're here to save ourselves.
That's right.
But the thing is that, again, we can't do this without support. And those connections and such are important. There are many, many people who seem to think, oh, well, those poor, Black atheists, and it just becomes lip service, which annoys me to no end.
Right.
And I don't see y'all that way at all.
Yeah. Well, and people don't seem to grasp. There's a massive difference between, paying lip service to something in the form of these poor Black atheists, mm-hmm. and actually sitting and listening and trying to understand why, coming to atheism is different for Black people than it is for white people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. and it's understanding that I think is what's missing in a lot of areas. That and mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes we got to sit down and just shut up and listen.
Yeah. Listening.
Yeah, and also that the emotional labor shouldn't always fall on us,
right, to
make you understand.
Absolutely.
Because we're getting that a lot too. We get a lot of people that say, well, how can we help? What can I do? I don't know what to do. But yet this goes back mm-hmm. to when we tell you what to do and when we advise you on what to do, you don't follow through. Or it's like, well, I can't do that. Well, then if you can't do it, then why'd you ask?
Right.
All you're doing is getting in our way.
Right.
Yeah.
And there, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
One more point before there are, I get approached by people who are paid to do this work in this movement, mm-hmm. but it's like they still want us to do their work for them. And I'm like, no, that just cannot happen anymore. Yeah. Because then you're not being, and these are people who call themselves humanists.
Right. Yeah, we had a situation several years ago with a member of the ACA who every time a woman or someone non-white would come to, say, an ACA lunch, he would approach them and say, "Oh, hey, I noticed that you're a woman," or "I noticed that you're black, and we don't have many people like you here." And I finally went to him and I said, "Look, you've got to stop doing this to people." And he's like, "What do you mean?"
Right.
And he's like, "I'm just trying to welcome them to the group because, we don't have very many women or black people." And I'm like, "Look, nobody wants to be the token anything." And that's what you're doing to people, Just bring them into the group. Ask them about what they do, how they became an atheist. Listen to their story. Don't point out the one thing that is going to other them in this group.
I really like what Mandisa was saying, though. Mandisa, I really like what you were saying about, the people that get, you were like, the people that get paid to do this. And immediately the first thing I think of, is when I tell people it's not my job to explain this to you. Yeah. And that's the thing. It reminds me, I have a good friend who is a trans activist. And a lot of times if I see something or I'm not sure about something, I will run it past her and kind of say, well, here's what I'm thinking about it, but, can I do the sanity check here? Well, what's interesting, though, is before I contact her, I go and research it.
Right.
I don't just go to her and say, "Hey, can you tell me what to think about this?"
Exactly.
Like, I go online and I say, "Okay, this is a weird question. This is a weird thing to think about. This is something I haven't seen before." And so I'll go look it up and I'll read what people have written, like in favor of it, against it, like what's going on with this thing. And then I formulate a view of it that I think is informed. And then I might go to her and say, "Look, I've got this thing that I just came across. And you're probably aware of it. I'm not. I just saw it. But I went in and I did look this up and saw this stuff and I was really impressed by this and this and this. And ultimately, what I think is this, am I missing something?" And I also make a point to tell her, please don't let me abuse my privilege of association with you by making you like the trans person who filters everything for me or that I run to every time I have it. You're not just the trans person that I know. And so I think it's really important that it's like I acknowledge her experience and I acknowledge her knowledge with regard to this sufficiently that I am willing to go to her and say, "Look, I want to hear the opinion here of somebody that is in this community that works with this and that understands it, has a handle on it." I also don't want to waste her time, so I spend my time looking into it first. And I also try to make it really clear to her that I respect the fact that I am requesting her feedback and her time and that she does not owe this to me.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, there are more people who could follow that example. I think it is important for us to, as I said, build those bridges and keep those connections in place. And it's better to ask the question and better to be prepared than to just shoot off and, you look and sound ridiculous.
Right.
And just being humble goes a long way. I see a lot of people asking questions and they're just not humble. They assume that they're right and that, and they also come off as angry. Just be humble. I see it on your page all the time. I see it on Alex Jewell's page all the time. I'm like, wow, people, do you hear yourselves? It's just obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like, well, because I had this experience with someone last week, who came to my page and talked about, as being a staunch skeptic, and
I
what
saw
they
that,
look for in the movies, and was dismayed that I did not possess the same, qualities or whatever. And I'm like, wow, way to assume that I don't, for one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But also there's a huge difference as a customer service professional and as a hospitality professional on how I do things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not embarrassed by that, and I'm not going to apologize for that, because that is something that I do discuss in my presentations, how we engage, how people should be, especially if you say you want to do better.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this is how you can do better. And this is how you should be doing better when you are engaging people of color, when you're engaging women, when you're engaging each other.
Yeah.
And it's just so amazing and astounding that they don't think we know that. Like somehow they think they know better than us.
Yeah,
and they mean I want to say that it's, you know what I mean? I want to say it's, you know, because, you know, we're black or whatever. But, you know, there's just still this undertone, especially the men. The men do this more often.
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me of men who always want to chime in and offer rape prevention tips to women. You know, it's like, oh, really? You know, are these the things that work for you to prevent you from being raped?
Right.
That's awesome. But, you know, they act like women don't spend almost every day of our lives thinking about how to not get sexually assaulted from about puberty on.
The way I move through the world is governed by that.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, I would not walk certain places. I would not go out certain times of days. I would not, et cetera, et cetera. I walked here to the ACA today. It's because I felt safe.
Right.
If I hadn't, and I don't think men think about that as much.
Right. Well, and the thing is, I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that we're sitting around cowering in fear and obsessing over
this.
It's
just something
just an item on the checklist for every woman out there.
Yep.
And, you know, it's so ingrained as a habit that we run through the checklist real quick, and that's, like I said, it's one item on the checklist, but there's not a day that you don't think about.
Yeah. And I've seen incidences, and this has happened to me, where you have an incident, something that occurs, and then it makes you question, like, whether or not you need to change the way you're doing something. Like, literally, you change something that is just, like, a normal part of your routine or your life because you're basically like, I don't want this to happen again. And it's people, that's what people that do these things, right? People that perpetrate this kind of a fear, to me, you know, it's not just about the victim. It's about the idea of creating this sort of self-imposed prison in people, right? They're literally using fear to then make everyone else or certain groups of people feel like they then have to restrict themselves in order to not be victimized, which to me is the most grotesque part of it, right? And so when people get into the idea of promoting that in a way by saying, oh, we should all restrict ourselves like this and this, and basically promoting that we need to create an environment where everyone lives in self-imposed prisons so that, you know, you're not victimized. And if you don't, and then the worst one is when you don't do it, and somebody else wants to then blame you, right? And say, well, you know, were your doors locked? How were you dressed? How were, you know, what was going on? Did you answer the door? Did you tell them this or that? Did you say this or that? Did you express this more clearly? Right, and that was the other thing that got me, like the consent issues, right? Did you express that you didn't want to do this? Like, you realize that you have to say you do want it before somebody does it to you. That's what consent means. It doesn't mean that you tell them to stop when they're doing it if they haven't gotten your consent. Right? And like, they're blaming the victim, saying, did you make it really clear that you didn't want this? And it's like, actually, you should be asking, did I make it clear I did want it? Because the person who did this to me needed to know that before they even started.
Right.
Absolutely. You know, and I know y'all might have seen the, you know, the issue with the dress at the American Atheist.
Yes.
And then wait, let me just interject before you go on. I just want to say, I saw Mandisa in this dress in the it was like the hall, you know, where they do the vending. I forget what you call that, but like, you know, so you got the vendors, you got the hall. She walks by in this dress, and I was like, I love this, I love it. I was like, you know, let me see that. Turn around, what's it say? And so I was like, before the whole dress thing even happened, I already liked the dress. I was like, I love the dress. Yeah. So go on with your dress story, because this is really funny.
Yeah. And you know, I remember wanting to create something unique. I always have these unique, like, being uniform ideas, you know, or just sort of like apparel ideas that I'm starting to see, you know, sort of replicated amongst other organizations. So I always wanted to get like a dress that had the BN logo on it. So I finally had one created. And so I thought, what better way, where, it's the perfect place to wear it at the American Atheist Convention for this year.
Yeah.
Because my last day at the job was that Wednesday, the 28th, flew out to Oklahoma City, and then, I was told that I would be speaking right before Hugh Laurie. And so I was like, well, I'll have to bust this out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so that was, primarily, what my thoughts were. And I love that almost everyone there who was there said that when I came off the stage, I was being asked, where can I find that dress?
Where did you get it? Yes.
Yes. And so when I saw that first comment, I was
Wait,
like,
first
here we
tell
go
people
again.
tell people about the dress. Like what is the dress?
It was a white dress that had the Black Non-Believers logo on the front, across the boobs.
Yeah.
And it had the flare, sort of like the baby doll style dress. It was long sleeved, but it was a little, it was, for me, it was short. It showed my legs because it was
it was above the knee.
It flared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it was above the, very much above the knee.
Because, oh my God, you have
There was
legs.
nothing-
I'd say from what I remember, it was probably mid-thigh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, it was, for some people, they said they would consider it too short. There was one woman who said that she was appalled by the dress I chose to wear on stage. I mean, the first comment was from a gentleman who said he was in the audience, and he went on to detail about how he saw that I wasn't wearing any underwear underneath. And he was glad he didn't bring his son but it's like this idea that what I was wearing was going to taint the fabric of the entire convention, that it took away from everything that I said, even though the only thing you could really see were my legs.
Yeah.
That's it.
And the message, right? The message on the back.
Yeah.
Right? Which just
Right,
for
yeah.
people to know, on half Mandisa's butt.
It was right on my butt. It was the slogan right on my butt. Hey.
And it said, I walk by sight, not by faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, everybody loved it.
Yes. And I appreciate that. And I've always been, like I said, I'm a very unorthodox individual. I remember when Secular Woman, when they were first getting started, they were working on a calendar project for prominent atheists to pose either nude to semi-nude. And I'm very, very big on body positivity, positive body imagery, nudity, and stuff like that.
Sure.
Because I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of. We get a lot of, especially women, especially larger, full-figured women like myself. We get a lot of criticism for that we're not healthy enough, and that we don't look a certain way, that we wouldn't be appealing, to certain people. So therefore, we're not supposed to embrace our sexiness or our bodies or the way we look. And so I look to defy that.
Right.
Right on.
I'm like, damn your expectations of me.
Right.
And what you think it's supposed to represent. It doesn't mean I'm slutty. It doesn't mean I'm being sleazy. It doesn't mean that I am less than, anybody else.
Yep.
It just means I may like a certain style, and I so when I saw those, I was like, oh, here we go again. With the people who think that, when you're a certain size or when you have a certain presence that you're supposed to look or dress a certain way, which to an extent, depending on, depending on what you're doing, that I can agree. But with that setting, the dress was perfect.
Yeah, it was very perfect. And I think there's a certain amount of, I guess, condescension involved in telling someone that you strongly disapprove of their clothing or the way they presented themselves. It's as if he had the right to.
Well, there's a certain arrogance, right?
Yes.
Like, it's not just them thinking something. It's them thinking that somehow you need to know what they think. Right.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's the thing that gets me. It's not so much. I mean, yeah, it's too bad that somebody thinks it, but when you think a thing, right? Like, it's like when people write to the show or something, and, and I don't know that much. I haven't seen the Godless Bitches emails that much, but I remember, like, with TAE and stuff like that, they'd write to the show, or they would contact us or be on Facebook. They're friends with us on Facebook, and something would happen, and they would just be like, "Oh, I thought that you were this or that, and I just don't respect you anymore." And I would be like, "You don't have to respect me. It's interesting that you thought I needed to know that you don't respect me, because I don't care. Who are you?" Right? And so it's to me, when somebody has a criticism, the criticism is valid or it's not. You don't need to try and strong arm me into caring about your opinion by pretending that whether or not you respect me matters to me, because it doesn't. I don't care if you respect me or not. If you think I'm wrong, tell me why you think I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't really care how much, when you tell somebody this, I don't respect you for this, what you're basically trying to do is to say, do what I want you to do, and then I'll respect you again. Right. It's a manipulation technique. It's just like a childish sort of,
There's no guarantee they're actually going to support you. I don't know yet.
But even if they would, I mean, it's not. I'm not gonna do what you want just so that you'll respect me.
Yeah.
It's like if I'm gonna do the thing that you want me to do, it's gonna be because you've convinced me that's what I should do, not because I need your respect so much that I'm just gonna kowtow to whatever it is you ask me. That's ridiculous.
Oh my God!
They come from a different world.
That is an attitude. That is an attitude that is very prevalent amongst, the atheist leadership. I will say that, being someone who is privy to some of what's in the inner circle. I have seen some of what happens when, you're supposed to kiss one person's behind because they have a certain amount of money and that they might be able to give it to you. I'm like, I don't necessarily care about that. I mean, support and donations are nice, but not at the expense of, not at the expense of my expression, and not at the expense of, my integrity, because I know how to work to get what I want. I've never expected it to be given to me. And so therefore, and I know how to show appreciation for people who support from a small amount to a large amount. And if that doesn't work for everybody, then fine. So, there's just so much, especially so much that is placed on us as women. That we're the expectation that we're supposed to have.
Yeah, you're right. It is mostly put on women. Yeah. People feel like they can say what they want to say just because they're women. Or,
Well, when was and I mean, that's a good point. I mean, when was the last time there was a male speaker anywhere who, at the end of his speech, somebody turned around and said, "God, his talk was interesting, but did you see his suit? It really sucked."
Oh, well, suit. Yeah. I've seen so many different talks and formal, and men will wear jeans and a T-shirt. And no one bats an eye.
Yeah.
And then the women all have to dress nicely, or else they will receive the wrath of people who are like, "Oh, she's not very professional," and and her credibility is hurt at some point.
Yeah, it's like, you want me to wear pantyhose and you show up in a T-shirt? Come on, dude.
Yeah. It happens.
Right. And then also, too, it lends this idea that just because you're dressed well, that you're representing well, which we know is a lie.
Oh, for sure.
We know that's a lie.
Gosh.
That just because someone, heck, there are many pastors and preachers that they dress in these $1,000 suits, and what are they doing to people? Whether it's in public and in private. So how you dress is not an indication, isn't always a good indication of how you are.
Right.
Well,
book cover, right?
Yeah.
There are certain prominent atheists who have fallen of late who always dressed nicely when they spoke. And they were not nice people.
Yes.
No, they were not. And so there is still this, this perception that the other person who wrote about how she was appalled and an affront And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't do front. I don't do front.
Yeah.
You're gonna know how what you see on stage and what you see in the public is going to mirror how I am in private. In fact, it's nicer, off that stage.
Yeah.
So if that's what you're basing, what we, our movement on, then it's still, you might as well have just stayed in the church. You might as well have just stayed religious.
And what's interesting, like when you're talking about that, you might as well stay in the church, you might as well stay in religion. When you were talking about this earlier, when you're talking about it now, one of the things that I kept thinking was these ideas about weight and the idea about modesty, those are ideas that if you took out the church influence, they would be like, we wouldn't even be having this discussion.
Right.
I mean, it's the church influence. I'm not going to say that it's weird. It's like the church has a very big influence on how the culture and the society perceives things, even though it's a secular society. It is just influenced by so much religious thinking because religious people take it out into the society. They make these after-the-fact justifications for why their God is right. And so, and sometimes secular people buy into these cover stories. Right.
Yeah.
So you've got the veneer and then it gets sold. And I think, just it's a little bit of an off-topic example, like the intelligent design / Dover trial. So you take the thing that is creationism and you're having trouble getting it in the schools. And so you repackage it as intelligent design and then you promote it out to the public at large. And then 20 years later, there are secular people still saying, but intelligent design, though, I mean, it's got some merit.
It's a thing.
Right? And you're like, you realize this is just the scratch it out add in creationism. I mean, it's just it was the copy paste for God did it.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to other influences as well, like sex, our thinking on sex, our thinking on modesty, our thinking on even weight, right? I mean, religion comes into that, and you've got this whole thing of the assumption of the sin of gluttony and the sin of, and so you're overeating, and that's a sin, and that's wrong. So it doesn't just take on this sort of mild, go into your doctor, let's just make sure you're not, pre-diabetic, everything's cool, okay, go home. It takes on a whole other veneer of this is evil, right? And they may not think like evil in the sense of Ted Bundy, but there is this cultural perspective underneath it. That it's worse than what it is.
Right. That your body type is some indication of your character in some way.
Yeah.
And that if you conform to a certain body type, then you are somehow more meritorious.
You're lazy, you're overeating, glutton, it's like all these horrible things that people associate with it. And let me just say, after having thyroid surgery, let me tell you how much your weight depends on metabolic reality.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have a metabolism anymore, you're reliant on drugs to basically control your weight now. And that's what happened to me. It was like, bam, 20 pounds, get used to it. I was like, okay, and that's the new me. That is go out and buy a new wardrobe because this weight is not going away, man. And so there's the reality of what goes into a person's weight, and then there's all these weird biases that have been built up over centuries because of the religious hammering of it. And then you also have the same thing with modesty. I know people who will not go to a nude beach and get nude. It's like, this is a nude beach. It's not like your nightmare where you dream that you're naked in class, right? Like everybody's naked. And these people won't take their clothes off. And I'm not just talking about women, right? I've known men who will not go to the nude beach and get naked. And it's sad to me that our society has created so much body shame, even among, it's like you have body shame even among people who would be considered socially attractive, right? So you've got even the society's idea of shame and modesty even saturates among people who have the body types that society praises. They won't even, they'll be like, I'm too embarrassed to get naked. It's like, are you kidding? There's like, everybody at this beach would love to see you naked. Like, they're but they're ashamed of their bodies. Even the people who have the bodies that everybody else would be, well, that's pretty much what my society considers the great body.
Well, and that's like, when I was in the Army and I went to Germany, one of the big things in Europe is, in Germany in particular, is the saunas. They tend to be co-ed, at least on some nights, and and nobody wears clothes in there. You know, you wear a towel, you're going to sit on the towel, and that's so you don't sweat on the seat and stuff, you know. But the saunas it's naked and co-ed, right? And so these young guys were all excited about going to the sauna. And I'm like, you realize that you got to get naked to go in there too, right? And it's like their faces were stricken, like, oh my God, I have to take my clothes off too.
Yeah, I don't.
It's like, yeah, dude.
Yeah,
That's
you're not just
like,
watching.
Yeah, it's
Oh Lordy.
it's not a porn flick, you know.
Right.
You gotta get
But that was like that
Right.
podcast. I brought this up like a few episodes back, the one that was about, Man Enough, that
Right.
one. And I was saying that, I know it can sound really horrible to try and, it's not like, oh, poor me, I'm a male model and I'm ashamed of my body. And it's like, oh, yeah, we all cry tears for you. But there is something to be said about them coming forward with the fact that, you know what, I have this body that people tell me is like perfect, and I feel insecure about it, and I don't feel comfortable getting naked or taking my shirt off in front of people. And to me, it's a different kind of emphasis, but it's an important emphasis nonetheless to say it's really pervasive when the shame that you can instill is even instilled in the people that we would consider the most attractive people in society. That is some deep shame.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's scary stuff. Sometimes we talk about articles and stuff. I did have another question for you, Mandisa. You went to the American Secular Coalition Lobby Day in D.C., right?
Yes.
Yeah. I've done that here in Austin at the Capitol. I went into every single office and talked to somebody in that office, and I know the sorts of reactions I got. What did you say to the representatives, and how did they respond? How'd that go?
Well, I was able to talk to 3 of my representatives this time, like last time too, but I had the chance to speak with John Lewis's office last year, which was great. The first thing that, I always, they always advise us, to say thank you, for speaking with us. And I told them that I represented not only the Secular Coalition for America, but also Black nonbelievers, and that we're an atheist organization. And, I gave some background on both organizations. And so then I presented the information on what we were lobbying about, which was the Do No Harm Act and the First Amendment Defense Act. And so 2 of the representatives, 2 of the employees that I spoke with, they actually had more questions about the organization, and they seemed genuinely intrigued and wanted to know more about us and what we do.
Right on.
Which I was, I was a little nervous about that at first, but they didn't seem to run away from, the atheist and the secular identity. One of the young ladies actually said that, she grew up in a mixed religious home. So she understood that part about questioning and doubting religion. So it was a good experience. I highly recommend people actually talking, to their representatives, as well as openly representing as non-religious, because you just never know what kind of response you're going to get. It isn't always a negative reaction, or at least not perceived to be, or maybe they would have said something, once I left. But really, it did seem that the interaction seemed very genuine, which I appreciated. But first and foremost, I told who I was there representing, and I now that I have, now that I don't have, the job itself over my head to where I had to worry about how I was representing the company and such, I could do that fully representing Black nonbelievers and the Secular Coalition for America without having to worry about retribution from an actual job.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was great.
Outstanding.
Yeah. That's cool.
So did either Tracie or Jen have any more questions for Mandisa, or shall we go to articles? Or
No, let's talk some articles here.
all right. Well, there were so many good things that happened this month. I have a long list. I'm sure you guys do.
Go ahead.
Gals do too. So I'm going to let you all start because I'll fill in. We have not much time left. Wait, no, we go to 12:30.
Yeah.
We have half an hour. So what do you got? Or who wants to start?
I had just a quick thing. So I think we pretty much saw the backlash to, I guess it's Michelle Wolf, the comedian.
Oh, yeah.
Who hosted the press, what is it, the correspondence dinner?
The White House correspondent.
Yeah.
Dinner, yeah.
And so the biggest, what's interesting to me is there were a few jokes that were made about like Chris Christie's weight, Mitch McConnell's, neck.
Yeah.
That were like direct attacks on what people look like. And yet the one she took the backlash for the most was the Sarah Huckabee Sanders comment, which had really nothing to do with Sarah Huckabee Sanders' looks.
Right.
I mean, it was really weird. It was just like her saying that the makeup was made of the burnt ground up lies.
Yes.
But she didn't insult her makeup. It wasn't like she said, Anne, her makeup looks really crappy. It was, she just noted that she does, a particular type of eye look. I forget what you call that. It's like the
smoky eye.
Yes. Yeah. Where you make it, which is a look that is promoted by cosmetic companies and commercials.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is not a bad look. So it was really interesting to me that Sarah Huckabee Sanders, that joke kind of took a lot of heat. And the idea was, attacking women's looks. And in 2 instances during the week, there were conservative politicians that came forward, and I forget the first one, but I was just like, wow, really? And then the second one came out was, it wasn't a politician, it was Giuliani, an ex-politician, who's now an attorney, and he had said something about like, you can't go after Ivanka Trump. You can go after men because they're disposable, but you can't go after Ivanka because she's a fine woman, right? And that even that phrase, fine women, kind of freaked me out.
Yeah. Well, what I had heard was that we're not allowed to go after Ivanka because she's the president's daughter.
Right, that too. That was included, in his statement. And so I'm looking at this, and I heard one person during an analysis that was really great, and he said something about we wouldn't go after her because she's the president's daughter. We should look into her because of her major role in the White House and as the president's advisor. That would be why we would look into her if she had any reason for us to look into her. He goes, but what really shouldn't be happening is for the president to be hiding behind his daughter's skirts.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a great analysis of it, to like hold up Ivanka as this sort of human shield, right? Like she's a woman and you can't attack her. And I'm like, wow, how sexist is that? That is ridiculously sexist. It is so insulting. And I thought, well, how do you, it's always amazing to me when someone comes up with a way to phrase something that insults both men and women, right? Like this is equally insulting to men, and men are disposable and women are wilting, flowers who can't, have to be protected from crap that comes with their jobs. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, I loved Wolf's comment that Ivanka was as useful to women as a box of empty tampons.
Yes.
I was like, I'm sorry. That made me laugh.
Yeah.
But the thing that then got me was, as I'm looking at this, Kathy Griffin had come out and kind of voiced a little bit of support for Wolf, basically saying, yeah, I went through something similar, and, Wolf was even less controversial than what I did, and she's taking all this heat, and she really didn't even do what she's being accused of.
Right.
So all of the people who had gotten on to Wolf about her treatment of women and how disrespectful she was of women got onto the comment thread at one of these articles and posted some of the most vile, sexist, misogynistic crap I've ever seen, to the point that I posted on Facebook and I said, here's the article and here's some of the comments. And so I repeated some of the comments as, how vile is this? Well, apparently it's so vile that Facebook won't allow it, right? So I get a tag from Facebook saying, just a little warning, we're sure you didn't understand this, but violence against, gender and this sort of sexist slurs and blah, blah, is not okay. And I'm like, wow, that's really funny. I mean, I know that it's just an algorithm, so I wasn't like outraged or anything. I was like, I get why you did it, and it's probably a good thing that you're filtering for it. Ironic that I was trying to say this is vile, but what I did is I just reposted the article and told people I can't post the comments because they are that vile.
Yeah.
But please go and look at these comments because these are the people that respect women and that get offended when Michelle Wolf makes a joke about eye makeup being made from ground lies, and yet they will say this stuff that is just basically violent and hateful and completely sexist and misogynistic.
The Trump that bitch crowd is outraged that Sarah Sanders Huckabee got called out for her lies.
I'm fairly certain that those same folks were the ones who would say horrible things about Michelle Obama and the Obama daughters.
Yes. Well, and that's the thing that, they're going back to this, you can't attack the president's kids or whatever. And it's like, okay, the most recent president's children were minors, and there's a difference between kids who are private citizens who just happen to be the president's children.
Yeah, when you hire your kid into a cabinet position or a post position, or you hire her as an advisor, or you put her in there and you make her integral to the running of the executive office, it's no longer your kid.
Right.
She's got another role. She's wearing another hat here
She's
besides
a government
your daughter.
official, and the fact that she's related to the president is immaterial.
But what's weird is they have this weirdly distorted view of sexism. Right, that's what gets me. Is like they don't understand what sexism is, and so when they think they're calling out sexism, it's like this isn't sexism.
That
like
reminds me
you don't get it.
Of something I wanted to bring up. It was about it was a story that came out about John Kelly, the White House Chief of Staff, that he censors his language. He won't use
That was the other one.
profanity around women because
Why the fuck not?
Yeah, really.
God.
Because somehow he thinks that this is respectful of women,
But the irony was they were defending him, right? So that was the White House defense of him. So he had said something initially. I can't remember what it was, and they were just like, no. If anything, he has more respect for women than normal people because he doesn't even like to swear around them. And I'm like, oh my, do they not? They don't understand what sexism is,
No, and that's why I was reading this and I thought, this reminds me of, again, a time when I was in the military, and I had my boss, who's a colonel, and he was known for being particularly foul-mouthed. Okay, he dropped F-bombs here and there, and all kinds of four-letter words, and it was all fine. And people were just appalled, and they're like, "Oh, that guy's he's gonna get nailed for, sexual harassment or something like that." I'm also like, where's the sexual harassment here? He's not directing it at someone in particular. He's not sexually harassing me, certainly, or anybody else. He's just swearing a lot. And so finally, I actually had the IG come and ask me one day, and it's like, when he says this, does it bother you? And I just looked at him like, I don't give a fuck. And the guy goes, oh, okay. And he walked away.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting to me is when it comes to language, right? So first of all, I have no personal. I don't care. It's like when it comes to swear, there's some things that I think are offensive, and so I don't use them. And I won't use them around anybody because it's my metric, right? That's my filter. I don't use a racist slur. I don't use a sexist slur. I will try to avoid slurs because I don't think that it's right to denigrate demographics because I have a problem with a particular person who, in a completely unrelated way, is attached to a demographic. It's like, to me, that is wrong. So I don't use a slur, and I won't use it to other people because of my own standard. But then I understand other people have standards, right? So like somebody's 80-year-old grandmother who isn't okay with swearing, and I know, like, when I meet that person, I'm probably not going to swear. Now, if she starts swearing, I'm going to be like, God, grandma doesn't care, right? And so I get more relaxed, okay? But I tend to just sort of feel people out, make sure, what are they comfortable with, what are they uncomfortable with. I still am not perfect. Like, when I know somebody's not comfortable with swearing, I still will swear, but I try to temper it because I know I can really cut loose sometimes. And so there was, but one thing I posted on this was that there's only two people that I really know have vocalized to me, like, I just don't like the swearing. Both of them are men. I have never once had a woman say to me, you swear too much, or I'm not comfortable when you swear. And that includes friends of mine that are like 70-something-year-old women who do not care. Or if they do care, they don't cringe, they don't say anything, they act like they don't care, and they've never said anything about it. The only people that have ever said anything to me about being uncomfortable with it, men, two men. And yet, John Kelly won't swear in front of women.
Yeah.
It's not about women. It's about, is the other person comfortable with it? Are you making them uncomfortable with it? Because, and especially if you have to work with them. It's like if you've got employees and they're like got these weird religious restrictions and they're not cool with this, and it's like, but I'm not swearing tons anyway at work because there's a professional line there for me where it's just like I tend to not swear at the office. You know what I mean?
So were the men who told you they were uncomfortable with it, were they uncomfortable with it across the board?
Yeah.
Or because it was you, a woman?
Now, I will say,
a woman.
uncomfortable with it, and one of them did express that they were more uncomfortable when they heard it from women. And this, again, is like this religious thing, right? This is the religious stuff. And somebody had pointed that out because I had said, like, both the guys that were uncomfortable with both people I knew who were uncomfortable were men. And then somebody posted after me, and they were just like, oh, yeah, that's a religious thing where blah, 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 blah. And they said, and it always... the more Puritan woman is supposed to never, ever do it, right? Like, they're like, so even if they don't like the swearing, somehow it's always worse when the women do it because they're supposed to be these, like, arbiters of modesty and
the
Puritanism.
We're the civilizing force in society.
And I actually had one of the guys tell me that, that he really didn't like to hear it from anybody, but especially women, it bothered him. Now, I don't mind somebody expressing to me that they're bothered by it, right? Because a lot of times it has to do with upbringing. It's not necessarily a choice that somebody feels uncomfortable about a thing. So I don't mind somebody bringing it up. Now, I do mind if they get all judgmental and try to justify it to me, right? It's like, I understand that you were raised a certain way and that this, you don't like to hear that. It makes you uncomfortable. And it doesn't matter that it's not really rational. It's like, I don't want to make people uncomfortable if I can avoid it. And just, avoiding a few swears is not going to break my neck. So I'll try to make people around me comfortable. But at the same time, when somebody starts saying things like, people use swears because their vocabularies, it's like, oh, just stop right there. Okay, just stop right there. Because these are vocabulary words like anything else. And if you're going to say, you can't say, oh, this is fucking really great, then you shouldn't be even saying really. You should just be saying, this is great.
Right. Yeah, if you're going to go there. All right. Let's see. Who wants to do the next article?
Well, I did that one, so somebody else go.
Go for it.
I saw, I don't know if y'all saw this, it was an interview on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and she was interviewing Kamala Harris because she had run into Kamala in a restaurant or something. I may get the details wrong. But Ellen was talking to her and saying, oh, everything that's going on in the world right now, I think she meant primarily politically, is so disheartening and so forth. And Kamala made the comment that we have to be joyful warriors. And Ellen was completely in love with this sentiment. And I heard it, and I had a very different reaction to it. And I wondered, did y'all see that interview? Or
I didn't see the interview. I think I read an article about it after the fact.
I mean, the phrasing hits me as religious. I don't know that I have an automatic and negative reaction to it, but it hits me as a religious view.
It feels a little that way.
Yeah.
For me, it's something else, though. How about you, Mandisa? Did you see that?
I haven't. I don't really watch daytime TV, so
I didn't either. It was just on
the generation forever.
Right.
But it's very interesting. That kind of goes back to sort of how religion is so tied into the Black community, where anything that is perceived as being like, well, there's a way to, there's a way to fight. I mean, I am all for tact, but to be these always happy-go-lucky all the time, and I'm not saying that that's what she's insinuating, but I can see how, you could raise an eyebrow, like, wait a minute. You're in politics, you're kind of, you kind of have sort of a privilege there, because privilege shouldn't only be associated with, white males. Right. To a certain extent, there are many people who benefit from a sense of privilege. And so she may not have to deal with certain things on a level where she has to be angry. So I can see how that can rub someone the wrong way.
Yeah. My thought was, I can see a warrior being fair and ethical and informed, rational, empathetic, but I feel no joy in this war that we're in right now, this political war that I feel like we're in right now.
Not at all, nothing,
And so I just found that odd, and the idea, Ellen has a following. The idea that people will be like, oh, well, I'm going to approach this with a joyful attitude. I just thought that's really not. I don't feel like that's the direction we need to go. I feel like it needs to be full of empathy and rationality and being ethical. But joy just didn't strike me right.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about this a little bit, and it's like, okay, on the one hand, it almost seems like she was minimizing the toll this takes on people.
Toll is a very good word.
And on the other hand, I was thinking, okay, it could be terrible advice because people who go into this with this joyful spirit can have that joy ground into ash right along with Sarah Huckabee Sanders' eyes. And
It's the souls of the joyful warriors ground up into your smoky eyes. Oh.
I mean, having actually, been a warrior on battlefields before, I can tell you I wasn't particularly joyful. I was usually slightly pissed off most of the time.
It's kind of interesting that you talk about it in terms of like actually being on a battlefield. It's like I remember obviously Tolkien, right, the author, he was military, and so he had seen some pretty horrid things.
Right.
And I remember when I was younger, like reading for the first time the Rohirrim story of the riders, right, and how there was this weird battle description where they went out into battle and they're like horsemen with their swords and they're killing all these people, and the book says something like they were singing as they slew, and so they were like singing these war songs, and so it was like this weird sort of joyful killing. It was like just strange to read that. I mean, I understand it was like a cultural thing that he's describing, and that there have been cultures that subscribe to things like this.
Yeah.
But it was still weird to read because you were reading all these perspectives on the characters that were going to go into battle, and some of them were afraid, and some of them were more brave, and some of them were more like, I don't care what happens to me, it's like about this larger thing. He had all these different perspectives, but it was like, that was a unique perspective in the book of these people who were like killing and joyful about it. And it was just kind of an interesting, I remember it striking me as like, wow, that's kind of creepy actually.
Right.
It's like really
scary.
There
it is. It's creepy. It's not really an appropriate, at least in my mind, it doesn't go together. It's like,
I mean, now I'm talking about people actually killing people. So it's
right.
That's with joy. Right. It's like, oh, whoa.
Right, because it's like ranch dressing on ice cream or something. It just doesn't quite go. But
like you might be going a little overboard with this.
Yeah, and I mean, I see some of that as that sort of singing in battle and everything as part of like the ritual that helps people cope with what
get
they're
them
doing.
amped up.
Sure, yeah, that was their thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that could, but it's not like
I can see how though if I was on the other side of that would be unnerving. Like if I was an army on the other side and they're coming at me and they're just like singing away and like swinging swords, and it's like these guys seem way too happy to be running to their deaths or killing folk. It's
a little weird.
Yeah. So I mean, it is an odd juxtaposition. I would say that, she probably, my guess, I don't even know, how would I know what she meant? But I mean, my first assumption would just be that she's saying, keep a good attitude. But I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Well, it kind of reminds me of like in Norse mythology or Norse.
Exactly that.
Thought, the Vikings went into battle thinking, okay, if you're fearless and you acquit yourself well in battle, even if you die, you're assured of a seat in Valhalla.
The Valkyries will come and collect you, and it's you die in glory. It was a glorious death.
You'll be drinking with the gods in Valhalla tonight. So it's all good.
And you're right. It is a way to kind of get people into battle.
Yeah.
Like this is, you promote as a culture that this is a glorious like hero's death and that you will be exalted for it. And in a weird way, I mean, even though they were just like, this was just their war theme, when you look at things like terrorists, like what is it, the bombers,
right?
The suicide bombers. I mean, that's kind of their thing, is that this is some kind of a glorious act.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not willing to go that far for politics. Sorry.
No.
Well, but it would depend. I mean, I think that, depending how desperate people would get, I could see saying that there's a greater cause that I would walk into a building and take it down for. I mean, I wouldn't say that could never reach that point where I know that something is necessary and it would result in my death, and yet I feel that there's a cause greater than me that this would be worth doing. I think that could be legitimate, but it depends on what you're fighting and what it's not for 72 virgins. It would be more than that.
That's what being in the armed services is all about, right,
Well,
Jen? I mean, you're willing to die for something.
Well, I mean, ultimately, we don't train
You
with
don't
the idea that we're going
but
to
it's
to
always
die.
a possibility.
Right. The idea is it's kind of like what Patton was saying. Well, it's exactly what Patton was saying. It's like your job is not to die for your country. It's to give the other poor son of a bitch the opportunity to die for his.
Yeah, but still, there's an understanding there that it could go the other way, though.
Yeah. And there are people who make sacrifices
Right.
on the battlefield every day, knowing that they're going to lose big pieces of themselves or they're going to die, but they do it generally not for some political ideal. It's usually for the guy sitting next to him.
But like if a prisoner in a concentration camp had like armed himself with explosives and gone into the headquarters of Dachau and blown that to shreds, I don't think anybody would say, "Oh, that's a wacko."
No.
Oh, no, not at all.
Right. So, I mean, there's things that I think for some folks would be worth doing it for that I would probably endorse, that I would say, good job. That was pretty brave. But that, it's just like I said, it's a personal metric. This is a personal standard. So I'm not judging everybody, but I'm not going to do it for an afterlife.
Yeah. Right. But if there is an afterlife, I would like it to be Valhalla, because that sounds way cooler.
Of course, it sounds awesome. Riding around
You just have to
winged
die a
horses.
gruesome death. To get there.
Right. Get hacked to death, and then you live.
There is that.
Glory.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Okay, Jen, did you have an article?
I don't have any other articles here. I
Okay.
actually didn't do my homework this week.
All right. No. Did you have another one, Tracie?
Let's see. I think you had one that was kind of interesting. What was that I was
I
just
had
like,
a
whoa, there's
couple of them.
layers and layers of that.
Oh gosh.
What was that thing?
Well, until you find it, there's.
Oh, it was a preacher, right? He was, or some author was writing about he was writing his criticism of the new evangelical, construct.
Yeah. The magazine something review. I'm sorry. This is where my brain is letting go. But it was an open letter to evangelicals about their failures. And the article speaks all the evangelicals speak about what he sees Trump doing. Sorry, this is getting a little political, but it's more about his behavior.
Right. It's just about this evangelical or this
Right.
religious Christian writing about his disappointment with the current Christian movements that are more politicized.
The last paragraph of the article is the paragraph that knocks me out. I don't know if you can find it, but
I'm looking for it now.
right.
I'm a little slow with the internet.
Oh, you're not anywhere near as slow as me right now. So
It was in National Review.
National Review.
I was going to suggest that, and then I thought, I don't know if it was that,
maybe.
but yeah, it was that.
Would you be
I'm pulling it up right
dear and read the last paragraph for me?
Wait, as soon as I have it.
It was pretty powerful stuff.
Come on, please load.
Although I'm pretty sure that evangelicals would just not see it.
It
They
is
can't
loading. Thank you. Here comes a status bar.
see it. Yay!
I'm like
Right.
struggling with my iPad here on AT&T. Well, I noticed the internet is different today than it normally is. Like the internet login was not the same. Okay, so I've got the article up. I'm just scrolling. Okay, it looks like the last paragraph. Did it start soon enough? Soon enough, the need to defend Trump will pass. He'll be gone from the American scene. Then you'll stand in the wreckage of your own reputation and ask yourself, was it worth it? The answer will be as clear then as it should be clear now. It's not, and it never was. That's the last paragraph.
I just wonder if that will ever come true, if they'll ever see that.
Well, I think this, you know what this reminds me of? A little bit of what Mandisa was talking about earlier, right? So Mandisa, you were talking about how for you, when white America was seeing Charlottesville and going, oh, holy cow, what is this? And you're going, this is every day, right? Like this, the only difference now is, they got the torches and the guns and they're marching out in Charlottesville, but this is pretty much the attitude that's always going on. And, you're watching people like me looking at it going, ah! So I was reading this article and I was just like, wow. So even the people that are Christians are out of touch, right? Like, because for me, the Christian side of this has been an undercurrent that just sort of popped its head out of the water. And it's like, so the only thing that was like surprising to me in this is that they're openly expressing it. And I think that was kind of the thing with Charlottesville, it was that they were openly expressing it, but also the numbers. I have to admit, it was the numbers too. It wasn't just that they were openly, it was that there was more than 20 people. And that was what shocked me. It's usually when I think of like, the Klan going out the road, it's like a handful of people or something. And this just seemed, at Charlottesville, like a whole lot more people. And with this thing, it almost seems like this guy is surprised by these Christian attitudes that he's seeing. And I'm looking at it like, have you not been watching Wall Builders? And have you not been looking at what's happening with school boards? And have you not been looking at things that like with these school programs, these Christian, into the elementary schools, and then they've got this, going in for trying to get this stuff in classrooms, trying to take the funnel the money from the public schools to the private Christian schools. It's like all of this stuff is happening. Like all of this religious encroachment into the politics has been going on for a long time. And the only thing I see different is that now they stood up and just kind of said, this is what we want. We want control, not just our religious rights. We don't want our right to believe and practice protected. We want to make other people, we want to control what other people have access to.
And that shouldn't be a surprise either. That's been explicit.
Right.
Well,
that's what I'm saying. His article makes it sound like he's just like, oh my God.
What?
Yeah. But really, I mean, it almost seems like, and I don't question his shock at this in the same way that I know I was shocked when I saw Charlottesville and Mandisa's going, why? So I'm looking at this guy and I'm saying, okay, so he maybe really was shocked. But really, like if I was writing the article, it would just be like, okay, you've finally shown your hand now that everybody, not just people that are involved in separation of church and state issues, but now everybody sees what you're doing. Everybody sees what you got your hands in. Everybody sees what your agendas are. You're making it flagrant, bold, open.
Yep.
This is no longer hidden. You're just coming right out with it saying, we want to control the culture for our religion. And the only thing really is you can't take that back. You can't put that genie back in the bottle, right? And so for him, it's just like, hey, if we do this, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. And I'm just like, they've already done it. The only thing that can't go back in the bottle now is that they've pretty much done it in the sunshine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and for a long time, the people that were saying this stuff out loud, they were written off as, oh, that's just a fringe extremist. People like Brian Fisher or, the Focus on the Family, they've always been out there.
Well,
the way this article started, right? The guy writes at the beginning of the article, he says, a Christian's primary purpose is not to defend his own religious liberty. It's not even to fight abortion, as vital as that task is. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, so you are politicizing your religious perspective. You do want to push your religious opinions onto people using the law. Like you are anti-women's reproductive rights and you're okay with that. You just don't want them openly expressing that we want to oppress women. And it's possible that this guy doesn't understand he's oppressing women with that view. It could be the case like with the intelligent design person who has just absorbed it and they're just like, this is not creationism, this is intelligent design.
Yeah, it's
and
totally
it's like,
different.
Actually, it was Discovery Institute that gave you that label. And so the idea that he actually supports what they're doing, it sounds like, when I'm reading the article, he's okay with these initiatives to politicize the religious perspectives and to use the law to promote his religious perspective and restrict other people from what they can do. But he has this weird issue with these people doing it as openly as they are.
Is it possible? I'm just throwing this out there because I know I come at articles like that with my very atheist perspective, and it can border on the paranoid sometimes. So is it possible that he does believe those things, that abortion is bad, but
Oh, yeah.
but that he doesn't necessarily think it should be politicized, that battle should be won in other ways? Is that being read into
If
it?
he does, then it's a dangerous thing for him to write, it's not even to fight abortion, as vital as that task is, because I can't think that anybody that's politicizing that, not reading it and understanding that he just endorsed what they're doing.
All right. Well,
He's just saying that's not our primary purpose. But it's like, well, then what, the primary purpose in his mind is to glorify God, right? That's what he ends up saying. And he thinks they've lost their way because they're supporting somebody that doesn't do the things that that their religion dictates should be done. Which, Trump is no icon of Christian. Well, and that's the weird thing. It's like he's no icon of Christian morality. I hate to call it morality, but like the rules or the values is probably a better word. Rules might be a good word, but
he doesn't have any values except what he. I need to stop.
Right, but it's just that he's not representative of what they say they represent. He is very representative of what they actually represent, which is like division. I mean, look at division, and there's all this undercurrent of racism, sexism, all of that. He embodies a lot of what they. I mean, if people joke that if they had the world, Pence's, they say is the joke that I think it was Wolf said something about Handmaid's Tale. It would be like his dream future or whatever, and the Handmaid's Tale is just basically retrofitting Old Testament, culture onto the modern era. I mean, that's what it is. They're taking all this tradition. Now, I haven't seen the series. I saw the movie back when, but it was just this idea of taking all of the Old Testament culture and just overlaying it onto current times. And so if we had this biblical ideal of what the world would be, it would be this like horribly sexist, divided society that, this nightmare for many people. But of course it would be just this wonderful world for the evangelicals, right? Who would just be like, this is great.
Well, the men.
But I don't know ultimately what they actually want, right? Because I think I may have talked about this before, like the idea of the mulligan, right? Give them a mulligan, or we can overlook all these things about Trump because he's promoting this abortion agenda for us. And I look at it and it's like, my understanding of the concept of Christian sin is that there is no hierarchy of sins. They're all the same sin, right? So to say, I'm willing to overlook lying to see abortion get punished, it's like, well, why can you overlook abortion to see that lying gets punished? Like, because they're the same, right? Like in your religion, there is no hierarchy of sin. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, right? It's like we're all separated from God through sin, right? It's not like you get like a couple mulligans worth of sin and then God starts tallying. It's like all of this sin is supposed to be just as bad. There's no ranking. So I don't understand what makes them so hot about abortion, as even though an abortion is not even a specifically called out problem, right? The Bible nowhere specific. You have to kind of connect a few dots to try and make an argument that abortion is wrong according to the Bible. But let's say that you do. There's other things that are specifically called out, like lying. Right? You do not bear false witness. Don't lie. And so you've got these sins that are just as bad that are called out specifically, and they're saying, well, we can overlook that because we can get this other thing that we want restricted. And it's like, so why how do you pick, and how are they picking and choosing which sins are overlookable and which sins are, we need to pass laws to stop people from sinning? I can't grasp how they, I mean, of course, obviously, the thing is, this goes with the sexism, right? It's like people punishing people for sex, and they have ways of punishing men and women for sexuality that doesn't fit in with what they see as the Christian model.
Right.
But that to me seems like what it is. It's like they can't bear the thought that these people are expressing their sexuality. But then I'm like, well, I don't know why the sexuality freaks them out more than like the lying freaks them out.
Or if they're freaked out by sexuality, why aren't they freaked out by serial adultery versus
I don't get, and a lot of times they'll say like, well, whatever punishing women is like their thing, right?
Yeah.
So like even in the Middle East where you have these like really harsh punishments for infidelities, it's a lot harsher penalties when women end up getting caught. And I feel bad saying that because we've got there's an atheist who was just his death sentence was just reconfirmed, and I can't bear the thought that somebody's going to die over a lack of belief in God and simply expressing that.
And I had someone tell me that my willingness to insult Islam and the Prophet while in Saudi Arabia was just as bad as this guy being executed for being an atheist.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
No.
And she's Muslim, and she was arguing that my attitude was just as bad, and I was like, no, insulting ideas is not just as bad as chopping somebody's head off.
It's not even as bad as insulting a person.
Right.
Insulting an idea is insulting an idea.
Well, and I told her, I said, if you think that, then that's just further evidence that your religion has poisoned your ability to reason.
No doubt.
I mean, it's
but
ridiculous.
these are just, I mean, I'm sorry, Mandisa, do you have things to add? We're not even inviting, like...
Oh, no, I'm just listening.
You're like, this is the part of the show where I kick back and drink my glass of wine. Well,
yes. Nothing that this administration, nothing that's happening in this administration right now is surprising to me. Mm-hmm. It's very disappointing, but these people, these Republicans and then the people that they voted this man in office.
Yeah.
And so now it seems like they're getting what they deserve, but unfortunately it's at the expense, of the rest of us.
Right.
Yeah. I have all these weird dichotomies that go on in my head that it's sort of like I feel one way and then I feel another way and then I feel, it's like that, in one level, there's, I don't know. Yeah, I can't, unlike with Claire, I have to draw the line because we're not supposed to get too political. When it comes to
the
specifics.
opinions expressed by us all has nothing to do with the ACA.
And our guest is, not representing ACA, so this is the three of us that have to be a little restricted about what we talk about. But, one thing that I did see that was going on recently is, there was all this denigration of immigration, and especially undocumented immigrants, like going completely, they're all horrible people and they're gangs and they're dangerous and they're coming here to, and then there was this horde that's coming up through Honduras and blah, blah, blah. And then, the horde stopped at the border to ask for asylum and be legally processed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now, we have just yesterday, I guess it was in Dallas, comments about how they're gangs and they're dangerous and these countries send us the worst of the worst and basically just poisoning people even against the immigrants that are asking to come in legally, saying that the requests for asylum are just trumped up, requests for asylum, that they don't really, and it's like, there's a lot of real violence happening in parts of Central South America. I had a friend that worked in Guatemala, and she was on a hit list, and she had to leave, and there were other people that were on that hit list that had to leave, and she was there dealing with reparations for people whose families have been murdered and trying to separate who had been coerced into the military to do these atrocities and who, it's like there is stuff going on there that is really scary. Mm-hmm. This is not made up crap.
Right.
And so it's really disturbing to me that, now they've announced they're not going to provide any shelter for these people. And these are the people that they were like, if you're going to come in legally, like you should obey. And so it's like, okay, if we're coming in, we're requesting legal entry.
How hard it is.
Right, but I mean,
no idea.
These people are requesting legal entry.
Yeah,
right.
And they are being denigrated now. So I think this shows that this is not about whether somebody has documentation or not has or doesn't have documentation. This is about just simply they're coming in from the wrong border. Right? I mean, if they were coming in from the northern border, nobody's even paying attention.
Right.
But all these people are gangs, and all these people are, it's like because they don't like we were talking about earlier. They don't look like the Happy Days America.
Right. And in the meantime, there's I know we're running short on time here, but I wanted to get this in. There was this guy in Toronto who ended up killing 8 women and 2 men and critically injuring 16 others and he was one of the self-described incels, the involuntary celibates. And
Oh gosh.
and for them, Elliot Rodger, the guy that killed those people in California, he was
he had the manifesto, right?
Yeah, he had the manifesto, and so these are the guys who they believe they are entitled to sex, and they actually have journalists defending this. And one guy, he's an academic at George Mason University, who is basically saying, "Oh, well, we need to understand this is a legitimate problem." And I was like,
I would say they're a legitimate problem.
They are a problem, but not.
But I
like
probably
you guys
don't
think.
think
they
what he's
are, but
thinking.
their inability to get sex is not a legitimate problem for me.
Right. Right.
Not my problem.
Yeah.
The biggest way.
So, yeah, and people are pointing out that it's like, hey, if these guys would, come out of the house and maybe like attend to their hygiene and act like not creepy stalkerish toward people, maybe,
And not say, I don't know why I can't get a date because I don't swear around women's.
right.
Yeah. It's like maybe
Or-
if you just treated them like people.
I paid for your drink. You have to
Yeah.
fuck me now.
You owe me.
Yeah, but yeah, this is the same kind of entitled shit. Yeah, there's a guy that there's actually something called the redistribution of sex that posits the idea that sex is a redistributable resource.
What?
Yeah,
What does that mean exactly?
they basically they want to make sure that these guys are
means
getting
that
laid, because
consent
obviously that's the
doesn't
problem is that they're not getting laid. They wouldn't have these terrible misogynistic attitudes if they just got some sex.
I'm sorry, but you can go down to like anywhere and look at couples walking by, and there's nobody that can't get laid. Right. It's like you if you're having trouble getting laid, there's almost nothing you can name, because I can point to somebody that's holding hands with somebody else walking down the street that is in that category. It's like it is not because of this, it is not because of that, And so at a certain point, it comes down to self-examination, I think, right? And I can remember. I'm going to tell a harsh story about myself, right? I was sitting talking to somebody, and I was very much mocking someone that I felt was very sexist, and I said something about like, and he wants to be married, and he's in his 30s, and blah blah blah, and I was blah blah blah. And you should be asking yourself at a certain point, is it every woman in America or is it me? And then I kind of stopped and I thought about it. And I was like, at the time I was kind of like, well, I might like to be married, and I'm in my 30s and I'm not married. So wait a minute, what the heck, And so that's when I started thinking like, well, what is it that I want? But I got introspective. I never went, and that was the thing. It was like this guy that we were kind of making fun of had this thing where it was like all women in America. He was like doing the foreign bride thing. And it's just like, and I was kind of, like, this is funny. It's, every woman in America. And we were just talking earlier about the subcultures, right? There's Italian Americans, there's European Americans, there's like Korean Americans, or, here in Austin all the time, there's like big Korean, group of people. And so we have all these different subcultures here in the U.S., but every woman in America is like somehow homogenously like undateable and can't work for you. And so I'm just like, at some point you have to say it's not a billion women. It's something that maybe you need to do some introspection, right? And I had to do that introspection. I had to look at myself and say, okay, so wait a minute. If I'm serious, like if I seriously want to get married, what would I have to do? And so I thought about it, and I was like married in no time. Yeah, it's just like, but it means looking at yourself sometimes, right? And that's the thing. It's like if I really want to have a romantic relationship with somebody, which you can get sex by paying for it, right? So it's not legal, but it's like plenty of people do it, so it's there. But if you're really looking at, I want someone to consent to sex with me without me paying money for it, you're going to have to stop and ask yourself, what am I putting forward that would or wouldn't, result in my goal? Like, how do I achieve this goal? And it's not necessarily about the other person. Sometimes it's about looking at ourselves. And I know that this can be the case. I have one friend who's has very, very sparse sexual history. Right? It's a guy, and he's got a really sparse sexual history. But to this day, he's just like, yeah, I know this is me. This is about me, and this is not about like other people. Like I've seen way too many other people like of all walks of life hooking up, and it's not hard. It's not a hard thing to hook up. It's just for whatever reason I have trouble with this. Knew another guy who didn't end up going on a date until he was like almost 40. I guess he was 40 when he went on his first date. Ended up marrying the first girl that he went with, and as far as I know, everything was fine for a long time. I don't keep in touch, but they were fine last I heard. I think they had a baby and a couple dogs, and everything was going good. But it's just some people are late bloomers, whatever. But it's not going to be about other people. When there's something not working out with me and everyone else, me and every man, me and every woman, then maybe, it's at a certain point you have to stop and say, what is the common denominator?
Right.
And that is so hard for people.
Oh, see, that's the thing. If you draw,
because it can't possibly be me.
Right. Yeah, there's the Venn diagram of it. You've got all this introspective wonderfulness, and then you have the sort of person who needs to do it, and they are just mutually exclusive.
Well, and the thing is, ultimately, working on ourselves is harder and more painful than it is blaming other people for
It seems
stuff.
that way at first, but I find that it's super empowering.
Yes,
it
is.
Because when you say to yourself, there's something wrong with me, suddenly I have 100% of the power to fix it.
Right.
Yep.
I can't fix other people.
Right.
But I can fix me.
Yeah.
Right? I can change things about me. I can work on myself. I can go to therapy. I could take medications, or I could, and I'm not saying that every person's issues can be fixed. I know there are people that struggle with issues that are not fixable, but my attitudes toward other people and my presentation toward other people and my respect for other people is definitely something I can work on.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh my God, that was just brilliant. Is it okay if we end on that, ladies?
Absolutely. I think we're approaching 2 hours here. So
Yeah. Oh boy. One more time, Mandisa, why don't you tell us about your Patreon account?
Yes. Yes, if you go to Patreon, well, if you have to type in the link directly because you wouldn't be able to search it on Patreon because it contains adult content.
Okay.
So it's patreon.com/Mandisa Latifa. And it's actually, if you look on my Facebook page, I have the link there now.
All right.
It's also on our
yeah.
feed right now.
Cool.
Yes. Mandisa, would you please spell that for us? Mandisa Latifa?
Yes. It's MandisalaTeefah.
All right.
All right. Thank you. And before we let you go, I got to give you a message from another awesome Black non-believer. Phil Sessions said to tell you hi.
Oh, so I said, hey, I just love Phil. He's so
I know. He's awesome.
and adorable.
Isn't he? Isn't he? I just love him.
Yes,
right
he's
on.
amazing.
Right on.
And yes, and more people can find information about Black Nonbelievers at blacknonbelievers.org.
All right.
So if they're looking for, because even though I'm the founder and president, we're not mutually exclusive, and both entities, both of us, need your support. So we definitely appreciate it.
All
Right on.
Thank
I
you.
love the work you do, Mandisa. Keep on keeping on, please.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies,
Right.
for doing what you do.
So glad to have you.
Yeah. So thank you, Jen and Tracie, for a great show. Special thanks to you again, Mandisa. You're just awesome. I love talking with you. Do check out her Patreon account. Thank you to the crew who do all the hard work of making this podcast and every production of the Atheist Community of Austin actually happen. We don't need a savior. We have each other. It's all we've ever had and all we'll ever need.